Hello and welcome to Working with Miniatures. I'm Jim, and tonight we're going to be painting Spider-Man vs. Dr. Octopus from Marvel Crisis Protocol's Rival Panels. We'll primarily be using Army Painter Speedpaints and Warpaints. Let's get started. This miniature was previously primed with black, followed by zenithal sprays of gray and white. I start with Beowulf Blue and Slaughter Red for the base coats. Unfortunately, the Beowulf Blue seemed to lose all vibrancy once it dried, to the point where my first highlight was only aimed at pumping up the saturation. For every paint I use in this video, I only thin using water, and purposely used no mediums. I was happy with how Doc Ock looked, and I wanted to see if mediums were a necessity, and at least in this instance, it was not. This is the first highlight, which I glaze on between 4 to 6 layers, allowing each layer to dry completely before adding the next. I also decrease the area I cover slightly on each layer in an effort for smoother transitions. The second highlight is done the same as the first, multiple glazed layers while allowing drying time and reducing the area of coverage with each subsequent layer. The final blue highlight is applied carefully over 3 to 4 light glazes, which I tried to treat like an edge highlight, but along the contours of the muscles. Before I started with the red highlights, I went ahead and lined the web patterns with matte black. This took some time, especially around the neck where the lines are the finest. The red highlights took some time, and I spent a short time debating if I should highlight each segment as an inverted U or at the center as the highest point. I decided with the inverted U, as if I painted the highlights towards the center of each segment, it would look like they were stuffed with cotton akin to a puffy vest. With the exception of painting highlights to follow the segments and the musculature of his wrists and shoulders, the steps were very similar to the blue areas. The eyes were merely base coated with spaceship exterior with a highlight of matte white. I considered using a darker color as the base and have more highlight layers, but I couldn't help but think back to reading McFarlane's Spider-Man runs, where the eyes were frequently stark solid white. I wanted to pay homage to that, so I kept the eyes simple. I had base coated the web with Battleship Gray speed paint, which I apparently forgot to record, but it did not really define the recesses of the web very well, so I added a very light and controlled wash with dark tone before lightly dry brushing Spaceship exterior, careful not to fill the crevices. I had hoped that the gaps in the explosion could be covered by paint, but clearly I should have filled these before airbrushing. I resolved to not skip this step and mix some milliput, shaping it into a bowl and filling it with isopropyl alcohol. After a few minutes, I use a sculpting tool to scrape some of the sloth off, which I use a small soft tip shaping tool to push into the gaps. I would also dip the tip into alcohol to help fan or feather away the edges of the milliput to help smooth it. After base coating the explosion in matte white, I followed it with 2 coats of Babe Blonde. Note that the Babe Blonde is so thin naturally out of the bottle, I did not thin it down at all, and even after 2 coats, there is still some white still visible. Painting an explosion like I did here is painting it in a backwards manner than normal, with the brightest colors being thrown down first, and then progressively darker colors being placed where the highlights would normally be built at. Much of these applications I did as light stippling. For the smoke, I mixed gray and blue and then lightly stippled this on, slowly building this up over 4 to 6 light passes, concentrating primarily where the largest, roundest billows would be, and then I added some matte black to the tips of the longest blast cones. To finish the explosion, I lightly add matte white near the core of the explosion to return some light escaping from the center of the blast and then glaze it with unthinned Babe Blonde. Lastly, I use the equally thin Lava Orange as a glaze to help tie some of the oranges and reds together. The base itself was painted with the same as for Doc Ock and the concrete of the terrain, and it's not shown here specifically. The last steps I took on this miniature was to apply anti-shine matte varnish to the blue, due to the glossiness from either the deep blue or Viking blue paints, before glazing Babe Blonde on for some minor OSL. This is the end result. I'm happy to say that I now believe this is my best painted miniature to date, and truthfully it was pretty easy. I thought blacklining all of the recesses of the web pattern on the suit was going to be a nightmare, but it wasn't nearly that bad. In fact, even the red highlights did not take as long as I thought they would, with the majority of the time going into the blue highlights around the musculature and the explosion. I saw another rival panel set from Marvel Crisis Protocol, and if I do that one in the future, I'll make sure I give myself more than 2 weeks to work, as this was extremely stressful to get out on time, on top of my daily chores here on the farm and the hectic work schedule. All in all, I'm happy with how this came out, especially as it's been quite a while since I last painted a Marvel Crisis Protocol miniature. That's going to wrap it up for today. I hope you learned something or inspired to start or expand your own collection. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And if you like the content of this video and would like to see more, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm Jim with Working with Miniatures. I'm truly grateful for your time, and I bid you a fond farewell. Until next video.